Good day. My name is Noel D. Martinez and I am an English teacher at Langkaantu National High School. Presently, I'm taking up my master's degree at Pacific Intercontinental College, and one of my subjects is curriculum development and supervision. Today, I'm going to summarize all the concepts for the last modules that will serve as my finals for this term. Let me begin first with the principles of curriculum and instructional design, or we sometimes call this as the CNI. So what is CNI design effective? When is this effective? We can say that curriculum and instruction design is effective when principles are consistently followed and deployed. We can also say that it's effective when materials and activities ought to adhere to basic principles of design. So the thing that we are to remember in here is that more often than not, teachers discuss the importance of principles, but they sometimes fail to implement or to apply these principles in a classroom setup or in their classroom per se. Now, let me summarize to you the 8 general principles of CNI design. So one of the principles is what we call the equity. Now, this ensures access and the materials and practices and outcomes, right? Another principle is what we call the accessibility, or it must be accessible, meaning to say it must be fair, it must cater to everyone. Third, it must be consistent, the principle of consistency. Next is the principle of flexibility, where it provides a flexible avenue for participation and presentation for students and teachers. Another principle is what we call explicit. It must be that explicit. So be explicitly presented and readily perceived. It must not be that implied, or it must not be hard to understand. Next one, it must be that supportive. It should provide a supportive learning environment. And you also have it minimize effort, meaning to say that it minimizes the unnecessary physical effort or requirements. And the last one would be the learning space, which would ensure a learning space or learning environment that accommodates both the students and instructional methods to be employed in the classroom. Now, Park and Hanafi in the 1993 and Sherry in the 1996 developed a matrix of 20 principles in the corresponding applications for designers of curriculum and instruction. There are actually 20 of this, but I would only be mentioning to you the first 5 most important principles according to them. The first principle is that related prior knowledge is the single most powerful influence in mediating subsequent learning. Second, new knowledge becomes increasingly meaningful when integrated with existing knowledge. Number 3, learning is organized by the supplied organization of concepts to be learned. Number 4, knowledge to be learned needs to be organized. And number 5, knowledge utility improves as processing and understanding deepen. Of course, there are more of these principles, but I believe that these 5 are the most important ones that we have to remember. Next one, let's move on to the importance of visuals. Now, students are actually visuals. Most of the students in the classrooms are actually visuals. They cannot learn without an image, without a picture, or without a video to watch, or something that way. Now, why are visuals important? First, they play an essential role in the communication of both procedural and propositional knowledge. They actually reinforce visuals, reinforce our demonstrations and the image our students developed of the demonstrator. And second one is that they relate to the accommodation of different learning styles. In as much as we know that there are various learning styles of students because they are all different. Now, they'll propose 3 modes of learning, and let me give you these 3. Number 1 is what we call the inactive, or we call this as direct experience. This is a direct teaching learning between students and teacher. Second is what we call the iconic, that a learner learns whatever pictures or whatever image that the teacher would present in the classroom. And third one is what we call the symbolic, which is regarded as highly abstract experience in which it would create a higher critical thinking skills on the part of the students. Now, what are really the criteria for evaluating the products of CNI? Now, let me give you the four categories. Number one category is what we call the content. Now, the content must be relevant to the philosophy, to the goals and learning outcomes of the curriculum. Second is what we call the instructional design. These draw students into group and cooperative learning as well as provide for individual growth. These also promotes hands-on activities and an applied approach to learning. Number three is what we call the technical design. This must be supportive of continuous learning by individual, and it must be relevant to the needs of the students. And the last one is what we call the ecological and social consideration, in which it reflects sensitivity to gender and sexual orientation, the perspective of and cultural and ethnic heritage. And this also promotes equity. Now, furthermore, there are two primary dimensions to the evaluations of CNI, or curriculum and instruction materials. Number one is what we call the policy dimension. Now, this requires special approval from different governing agencies and offices. It also maintains the standards of copyright law and licensing. The second dimension is what we call the practice or the application. Now, we need to develop a certain level of connoisseurship or mastery for making decisions on the CNI materials we adopt or create. Let me just give you now the general considerations for selecting websites, because websites are also learning tools, learning avenues for students. Websites that ought to be considered. So what are the general considerations for this? Number one is what we call the reliability or validity considerations. Now, clearly indicate the author, the contact information, the latest revision, the updates, and copyright information. Now, this is the new trend in education. Creating websites as a way of using this tool for teaching at the same time learning on the part of the students. Next consideration is what we call the content consideration. Now, this supports the curriculum outcomes. These also include for appropriate works of local procedures, and they have relevance to students' lives and interests. The third one is the audience consideration. Now, this promotes individual or group interaction as appropriate. And of course, the last one is the social consideration, which ensures material is appropriate in terms of the following. Number one, gender equity, role portrayal of the sexes, portrayal of sexual orientation, reference to belief systems, age portrayals, and also the last one is the socio-economic references. So, social considerations promotes equity. So it means to say that these materials that you ought to use in learning should have no biases in terms of social standings and sexual preferences. Now, let me move on to the concept of project. What really is project? A project is a method whereby students work through a series of activities and problems culminating in the completion of something tangible. Examples of these projects that students do are artifacts, media, and performance. Now, this is highly significant inside a classroom and practical unit of activity, and this is oftentimes part of the grades of the students, and this also reflects their behavior, their academic performance, and their skills and competences inside the classroom. Now, let me give you some conflicting views about projects. Calvin Woodward brought the project method into the schools actually, and Dewey argued for a psychological rather than logical order to projects. So according to him, he thought that the project should derive from students' interest rather from the logic of the steps of instructions. Theoretically, at least, projects contradicted the regime of coercion associated with conventional curriculum by giving students freedom or purpose or volition. That means to say that you cannot really force students to do something which they really didn't like. It must come from their own will or volition. Now, Kilpatrick's form of projects. According to him, there are actually 4 things that you are to remember in making projects. Number 1 is proposing, second is planning, third one is what we call the executing, and the last one is what we call the judging. According to him, he was not so much on instructional form as a psychological form. For Kilpatrick, a project undertaken by the will of the students as opposed to coercion was the epitome of self-determination. He referred to a project as a unit of life or experience, a part, a piece or slice of life, as a slice of significant features of life adapt. Now, what are the advantages of projects? According to Kilpatrick, there are actually some of these points that we are to remember as regards to the advantages of project and why the students make project. Number 1, projects serve as a vehicle to understanding key principles and concepts. Second, projects place students in realistic problem-solving environment. Third, projects can build bridges between school and other life experiences. Next one is project requires an active and sustained engagement over extended periods of time. And the last one, projects can promote links among disciplines and even can erode subject boundaries. Now, what are really the guidelines in making project? Number 1, the project is not merely the thing. Next, project must have definite educational values. Third, intrinsic values ought not to override the purpose of the project. As a method, project should be situational or relevant to the students and the context, and project should serve as a vehicle for disclosing conditions and processes of modern technology or content. Now, let me just give you one example of a project model. Number 1 is orientation, preparation, production, realization, evaluation, and the last one is what we call the projection. Now, design project model, it is actually a cycle. So the first thing that you are to do is a critical interrogation of condition. Second is the expression form. Next one is the critical interpretation of form, and the last one would be a public critic, where evaluation and assessment comes in. Now, let me move on to the unit. There are 5 steps of unit actually. 1 is exploration, second is presentation, third one is what they call assimilation, fourth is organization, and the fifth one is what we call the recitation. Let me give you characteristics of a unit. I'll only give 2 for this particular purpose. It is wholeness and coherence across activities. And second one, it transcends subject matter boundary lines and provides for the integration of subjects. Last part would be a module. What is really a module? A module is a self-contained independent unit of a planned series of learning activities designed to help students accomplish certain well-defined objectives. And now, what are the parts of the modules that we have to remember? Number 1 is what we call objectives. Second would be pre-test. Third would be rationale. Next one would be interactivities, post-test, and the last one would be the resources. There are 2 connotations of modules that we have to remember. First is that the self-contained instructional packages already described. Next one is self-contained instructional packages integrated within a self-contained architectural station. Now, the importance of modules and units and projects are actually need to be emphasized by teachers to the students, because this will be part of the learning progress of the students. And after doing so, of course, we will see development on the students, not only on his competences and his skills, but on his behavior as well. I think that would be all for my presentation. Thank you and God bless. Again, thank you for listening.